And good evening, Frank here with another edition of UFO News Network Sunday. Tonight on a Monday evening, we've got a special guest, so let me bring in my usual co-host, Chant Hanna, and she will tell us all about him. Chant, you do the honors.
Thank you, Frank. I think our show got abducted for a moment. We had some minor technical difficulties. But anyway, thank you very much for that fine introduction. We have a very special person on our show tonight. His name is Rey Hernandez. Ray is one of the 4 co-founders of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, or FREE, and serves on the FREE Research Committee. Ray is currently employed as an estate tax attorney with the U.S. Department of Treasury. He previously served as an adjunct professor for 6 years at the New School for Social Research and at the City University of New York. He graduated with honors from Rutgers College, was a master's candidate at Cornell University, and was a PhD candidate at the University of California at Berkeley in City and Regional Planning, where he was a recipient of a National Science Foundation PhD fellowship. Welcome, Ray. How are you doing this evening?
Muchísimas gracias. We were abducted, but just like my wife, we were returned.
We were. ¿Cómo está, Ray? ¿Cómo está?
Súper bien, mija.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Well, Ray, I wanted to bring up something interesting. Ray, apports are very different from telepathy or clairvoyance. Apports may not necessarily happen on command either, as some mediums or non-mediums have tried successfully, but also failed at this too. Please tell us the difference and the definition of this topic being apports, and then if you don't mind explaining teleportation also.
Okay. I could only speak by reference of individuals that have taken our survey and individuals that are spoken with. Approximately 25% of the individuals, of the 4,200 individuals that took our survey, mentioned that they had apports that just mysteriously appeared out of nowhere. Apports are physical objects that were not originally in your home or in your room, and that most of the time they appear in front of you or in a place where it's easily for you to see. There was a lady that you had on your show, I think a while back ago, that said that a penny just appeared right in front of her. That happened to my wife twice, where a penny just flew out of nowhere and put right in front of her, and it was a penny that she had placed under the bed of this deceased person that had collected pennies. And so that's one incident. But the most important person that I've known that has had countless of apports is my best friend, who lives here in Miami. And excuse me. Excuse me, and he has a whole shelf of apports. And it was seen by Dr. Joseph Burks, by Dr. John Alexander, Dr. Jeffrey Mishloff, who has a PhD in parapsychology.
Oh, yeah.
He actually wrote a book many years ago. I forgot the name of the experiencer, but it's an experiencer that that had many apports, and he wrote that book maybe 25 to 30 years ago. And I was introduced to that topic by, I believe it was Stanley Krippner, who wrote a paper, and he's also a very famous parapsychologist. He was a professor for many years. I believe Stanley's in his either late 80s or early 90s. and he was the one that really publicized this whole topic of apports. And let me just give you an illustration. My wears apports around the neck. These are objects that just mysteriously appeared. He has 4 rings that have been brought here, and all of them are his exact ring size. And he's had tons of other objects, and chains have been transported. We know almost nothing about this phenomenon. We can only describe the object and describe how it just popped into a lot of these people. But the way he described a lot of them is that he's watching TV on his living room couch. Sometimes his wife is with him, and all of a sudden you hear like a pop right next to him on the couch. And he looks, and there's this metallic object. And some of them were chains, metal objects that he identified as Tibetan. Other them looked like meteorites. Some of them were actually real chains with objects. One had a dragon with like a diamond on it. Another was another object that had like a ruby on it. So these are real chains that someone wore at one time, because these are man-made. So we know very, very little about it. What we do know, at least, is the rings that they all fitted him, all the 5 rings.
Right. That's fascinating. I wanted to ask you kind of an odd question. Um, Although I'm not sure if there's such thing as an odd question with this kind of interesting topic, but do you think some items in museums are apports and people don't even know it?
I don't really know. That's just speculation. I can't comment
Right.
on that.
Yeah,
I could only comment on what I know.
sure.
And this man is a retired federal DEA agent for many, many years. His wife is a PhD psychologist. Their daughter's a PhD psychologist. And all 3 of them are experiencers. But the wife and my friend, the male friend, they're both in their early 70s and very, very educated people, very professional, and the apports is just one little fraction of the type of experiences that we had. And the people that I've spoken with, the experiencers, again, the apports is one type of paranormal phenomenon, but these people are having a whole array of paranormal experiences, and we can talk about that later on. So the apports is just one of the many components to the paranormal reality and life that these experiencers are living.
Okay, and also wanted to mention to you, we've had a huge leap in the evolution of learning on our short time here on Earth. We've gone from seemingly caveman level thinking with stone tools to being brilliant prodigies who now use complex languages and rely upon the planet with our agriculture and technology. How did we get here so fast? Do you think that it's possible those in the past were exposed to apports that may have allowed technology at that time to have accelerated learning?
Again, I could only talk about what has either been in our survey, what thousands of people have told us, or what individuals have told us. So that's just speculation, that that question that you asked. But what I can say is that approximately 25% of the individuals in our survey, we're talking over 4,000 people from over 100 countries, have told them were told by non-human intelligence that they were upgraded. Okay,
Ah, okay.
that their DNA was upgraded. Okay, and that's a common theme that's being widely discussed by numerous experiencers. But here we have, hundreds and hundreds of individuals all over the world said that they don't believe. It's not like they hypothesize. No, they were told by non-human intelligence that humans are being periodically upgraded.
Understood. I was listening to Stanley Krippner earlier, and he was on the show, as you know, because I think you've been on this show before, The New Thinking Aloud, with the host Jeffrey Mishlove, the PhD, who's author of The Roots of Consciousness and PSI Development Systems and the PK Man. Stanley Krippner was on a show, and he said that the higher ego, the higher geomagnetic force, sorry about that, the higher geomagnetic field, the higher, the more likely anomalous experiences are going to occur. And he said that in conjunction with having spoken about apports. So he felt that the possibility of apports actually occurring have to do with the geomagnetic field of the Earth being at a stronger level. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't have any evidence for that. I've never read any evidence to that. I've never seen anyone make an evidentiary presentation on that. Um, uh, what we do know from our research study, this again, I'm just representing the entire Free Foundation, the academics.
Right. Yeah.
We have 9 PhD academics associated with our organization, is that when individuals have been exposed to either a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, or direct physical contact with a non-human intelligence,
Yes.
or have been aboard what is usually described as a UFO craft, okay? These individuals have an increased paranormal experiences, okay? It seems to be accelerated after these experiences. And the hypotheses that a lot of people are circulating is that somehow they have crossed the bridge or the field of this multidimensional reality. And then it's opened up these multidimensional paranormal experiences to their lives. And again, a lot of it is consciousness based. If sort of let me give a simplistic way of explaining it. Okay.
Okay.
If all of a sudden you've had a near-death experience, or you've been brought to a multi-dimensional reality by a non-human intelligence, okay, and almost double the people that have taken our survey that have been abducted, double the amount have been brought to a matrix reality from our survey, okay? So we're talking a hell of a lot of people. So once that has happened, it seems like your brain serves as a filtering device. So it filters all of the information fields from our physical and consciousness reality. So once
Yeah,
these
Ray.
experiences,
Ray, do you mind if I jump in here real quick and ask you a
yeah,
question? What convinces these folks that they were brought into this kind of virtual matrix reality?
well, the best way to describe it is the people that describe a near-death experience. Okay, if you've ever seen the picture from Jodie Foster, Contact.
Sure.
Okay, I've had that experience, and it's extremely difficult to describe it because it seems physical and non-physical. Okay, it's a reality where there's no time. When I had my experience, you get brought out, and by the time I returned, no time had been spent. So you're not in a three-dimensional reality, but it seems very physical in a sense. But what you're seeing and you're observing is not physical. I guess the best way to do is for people to start reading the literature and listening to the YouTube videos of near-death experiencers describing that place that they get brought to. So it's very easy for you to understand that this is not 3D.
Understood. I wanted to read something that's kind of interesting and see if you have a comment on it. It says spirit mediums fall into two categories, mental or physical. A mental medium communicates with spirits using ESP and is this type of mediumship that is demonstrated most often in public. Physical mediumship is rarer, more dramatic, and is characterized by levitations, rappings, apports, telekinesis of objects, psychic lights, and so on. And then it says Allan Kardec, whose real name was Hippolyte, was a French doctor and author of the Spirits book. And Kardec accumulated a wealth of info about spirits through various mediums. And he said this: the spirit world is the normal, primitive, eternal world, pre-existent to and surviving everything else. Spirits temporarily assume a perishable material envelope, the destruction of which by death restores them to liberty. The soul is an incarnated spirit whose body is only its envelope. A spirit, therefore, is not an abstract, undefined being, only to be conceived of by our thought. It is real, circumscribed being. Wanted to ask you, it says also, to explain the PSI events that occur in the presence of physical mediums, Kardec further claims that spirits are everywhere, in space and around us, seeing us, mixing with us incessantly. They act both upon matter and upon thought, and constitute one of the powers of nature, the efficient cause of many classes of phenomena hereto unexplained or misinterpreted. Since spirits, according to that idea, are around us and mixing with us incessantly, and they act upon both matter and upon thought, is it possible that spirits have been responsible for apports? Do you feel that that's a possibility?
We know very little about it, so everything is up in the air. Let me just state that Dr. Gary Schwartz, I don't know if you've ever heard the name, Dr. Gary Schwartz received a PhD in psychology from Harvard University. He then taught at Harvard University and then became a tenured professor at Yale University. So we're talking the cream of the crop here. And he was lured approximately 18 years ago to the University of Arizona because they gave him a whole boatload of money. They said most of the time you could dedicate yourself to research, and they gave him, and he was able to secure additional money for a research lab. Myself, free director, Dr. Rudy Shields, who is an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University, and several other of our academics, we toured his facility at the University of Arizona. He has approximately 10 different rooms with sophisticated electronic devices. And what he's doing is exactly what you discussed. They're working with mediums and trying to get the deceased entities to interfere with different electronic hardware. So it's psychokinesis taking place through a medium by a spirit. For just a little brief example, they have a machine that's like a laser, and they have a measuring instrument that records 100% when the laser is being unimpeded. You put your hand through it, and all of a sudden it goes to zero. Okay, so they'll tell the medium to communicate with the spirit that they communicated with, and they said if the spirit can impede into that, and so it goes in there and it impedes it. Now, whether it's the medium or the spirit, we just don't know. Okay, but they do put the medium in a Faraday cage under controlled mechanisms. I don't know the full details of his protocols, but he went into detail how all of this was a double-blind experiments, things of that sort. So Dr. Gary Schwartz has 15 years worth of data, hardcore data. The problem is that where in the hell is he going to be able to publish it? Because no reputable, quote-unquote, scientific academic journal would publish this thing. Because here's this professor who was a full tenure professor at Harvard and Yale and now at Arizona, with numerous publications, which shows actual data, all done according to academic standards for different psychological tests. So what you just said is being duplicated right now, and he's not the only one. There's several others that are doing it. Dean Radin is doing many. He's the chief scientist at the Institute for Noetic Sciences, and that's the institute that one of our co-founders, the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, founded back in 1972. For over 20 years, he's been doing, again, scientific double-blind experiments on psychokinesis, on channeling, but mainly the ESP phenomenon. And again, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt. He's shown that ESP is statistically significant, that yes, it does exist.
I wanted to mention something interesting for our listeners, and that is the Stanford University Museum has apported objects. They just keep that under cover. And the University of Manitoba, Canada, also has all of Stanley Krippner's apports also. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was. And I'm sure that there's many individuals all over the world that have apports, like my friend Alberto. If he were to die, his wife would probably give them away to everybody and not really tell them. They said, oh, this is something special that popped in, and he might give me a few, give someone else a few. He's given away like more than half of his apports to other experiencers. And but people keep quiet about it. What we determined in our survey was that the overwhelmingly majority of people that took our surveys, they've never spoken to anyone about their experiences, except maybe a close relative. So no one knows about these apports. Very few people.
I wanted to bring up something that Grant actually sent me, and that was on another show we did regarding apports. And that was a document that says confidential, July 1972, fully developed. This technique, it just goes on because it's a part of another document. So I'm just going to go ahead and start talking from a fragment of a sentence. It says, fully developed, this technique would make possible the abduction of actual objects, including documents, in enemy territory and therefore transfer to friendly territory. Objects so abducted are known as apports. They could be returned to the point of origin without the enemy becoming aware of this temporary abduction. Says number 3, some of the world's most eminent scientists from the late 1800s and the early 1900s have claimed to have witnessed apport phenomena. These include Sir William Crookes, 1832 to 1919, British chemist and physicist, discoverer of the element thallium, and former president of the British Association for the Advancement of Science, Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823 to 1913, British naturalist and co-discoverer with Charles Darwin of the theory of evolution, John K.F. Zollner, 1834 to 1882, professor of physical astronomy at the University of Leipzig, Germany. Says number 4, in the discussion of such esoteric subjects as apports, it is deemed sufficient to relate only one experience claimed to have occurred to Sir William Crookes. The interested reader can consult the non-cited bibliography for further references. I wanted to actually ask you a question about that, gave me an idea regarding the abduction of actual objects, including documents in enemy territory, and then their transfer to friendly territory. Do you think it's possible that our government or any government around the world might be involved in attempting to apport objects for intelligence purposes?
There's so much bullshit going on the internet, okay? And I don't play the bullshit game, okay? And so I've never seen anything written about it to substantiate it, any documentation, nothing about it. To me, it's just another bullshit that's taking place on the internet. However, like any bullshit instrument, it does contain kernels of truths in it, okay? So all those people that have seen apports, that's the truth, okay? All those people. And let me throw in now Edgar Mitchell. Let me tell you 2 stories of apports that Edgar told me, okay? He was at the Stanford Research Institute in 1972. He was the person that flew out to Israel to bring in Uri Geller. He was the first person that they began to do experiments with, okay? This is for the remote viewing project. Okay. And it was some intelligence person from Israeli intelligence told someone from the U.S. intelligence, who then told Edgar. Edgar then got the telephone number, contacted the Israeli intelligence person. They told him about Uri Geller, and they said, can I go out and meet this guy? He went out there and interviewed him and then convinced him to come to the Stanford Research Institute. Edgar told me that 2 things were all of a sudden mysteriously transported to him, things that he had lost, okay? One was a teaspoon holder. Like when you take a teaspoon and you squeeze it, I forgot the formal name for that. That all of a sudden he felt like a weighted thing on his jacket, on his suit and jacket. Mm-hmm. And when he reached in there, okay, it was the teaspoon holder. And it was, it's quite heavy. And he wore that suit a lot of time, the last month. Okay. Yeah. And he had it, dry cleaned and all of this stuff. So this thing just mysteriously appeared. The other thing was his shirt. In his shirt pocket, he had lost, he said it was like a medal of his brother from the Korean War. And he was so upset because he had lost it. And I believe his brother had died. I don't recall that part, but I believe that's what he told me. And then all of a sudden, in his shirt pocket, okay, was this medal of his brother that all of a sudden was like banging on his chest, He was like, what the hell is that? And he looked and he popped it out. And he says both of the times he was walking down the hall with Uri Geller.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay. And Edgar has told this story before. You would have to go through, hundreds of his interviews to try to pull that out. But Edgar told me that story.
That's fascinating.
And he told me lots of other stuff about Uri Geller.
Yeah, and also I find it interesting about the spoon story because, or the item related to a spoon, because Uri has supposedly probably the biggest collection of spoons on the planet. And as you know, that's his thing. So it's just interesting that happened while Uri was there. Wanted to bring up an interesting report that I found, and that is a teleportation physics study that was done by the Air Force Research Laboratory at Air Force Material Command, Edwards Air Force Base. And this teleportation physics study, I'll go ahead and just read the abstract. It's very short. It says this study was tasked with the purpose of collecting information describing the teleportation of material objects, providing a description of teleportation as it occurs in physics, its theoretical and experimental status, and a projection of potential applications. It goes on for a while regarding contemporary physics and apports. I wanted to ask you, do you feel that physics can support the idea of apports, or are we a long way off from that?
Well, I mean, the whole topic of teleportation, physicists and scientists have known about it for many, many, many years. I think the first experiment, and again, I'm not a physicist, it's just that I have a personal interest in this. So I'm talking outside of free, just my own personal interest, that they actually teleported, I think it was a photon from in the Canary Islands, which was I forgot how many miles it was, 80 miles. That was the first time that they ever had teleported a photon, which is a light particle. And then I forgot how long ago that was. Maybe it was 15 years ago. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but I know that now most of the major universities, physics-based universities around the world, have duplicated that and have actually gone from a photon to, I believe, molecules. It's very simple molecules. So it is taking place. And there was also speculation that in the future, as this technology gets developed, that eventually you might be able to teleport, larger physical objects, including the possibility in the future, we don't know how long, but of actual people. But the problem is with teleportation is that the way theoretically it works is that you're destroying an object and you're recreating the object at the other end. So you're getting Rey Hernandez, you're destroying it, but you're making like a copy of it, and you're beaming the copy to another location.
Okay.
At least that's my layperson's understanding of it. But yes, teleportation is taking place.
I had a situation occur to me that I wanted to talk to you about. I was living alone for a while. It was probably about, I can't remember, maybe a couple decades or more ago. I didn't really think anything of this. I woke up, and on my kitchen counter was a strawberry crystal that it's actually called strawberry crystal. I think it's like from Russia or something. But I'm a rock collector, and I had been looking for this rock everywhere. I knew it was gone because that was my favorite rock. I walked to my kitchen, and on the island of my kitchen, there was my strawberry crystal sitting there. And I knew I had not found it. Nobody was in my house. So I couldn't understand what happened. And then when I asked Grant Cameron to do a show on apports, it suddenly occurred to me that that could be a possibility. But it was very difficult for me to wrap my mind around it because this object had not been there for a long time and suddenly just appeared. And then what I did was I put it in a safe place. I know the place I put it in because I would always check it to make sure it was there. It disappeared.
Oh, yeah. It's extremely common. I have a friend, my best friend again, that had an ancient Chinese sword appear to him. And he captured it with a Polaroid camera. I think I might have sent it to you a while when you had that show on apports.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a huge Chinese sword from 600 BC. And that was immediately after this Chinese warlord physically appeared to him and told him about his past life. They told him, the warlord's name, that he was his adopted son in a past life, and told him his name and his history and went into detail. And it said, if you don't believe me, go to the bookstore, look up my name, go to the library, and if it's a good book, it should mention your name as well. Okay. So the next day he ran to the library and he did find that book, from this 600 BC, very famous Chinese warlord. Everything was all there. It even mentioned he had 23 kills, This is my friend in his past life. Well, a few days later, in the living room, boom, they heard a noise. And, he runs over there and there's this sword. And guess how many notches it had?
23.
23 notches. His
amazing.
His wife, who's the PhD psychologist, they lead a crazy paranormal life. So they didn't blink an eye, right? And he already had told her the story about the warlord. And this other statue, this Chinese statue of the warlord had been appearing and disappearing, for a couple of days now. And then the sword stayed in their house like half of the day. They were taking Polaroid pictures of it. The wife didn't want to touch it, And then by the end of the day, poof, they put it in a safe place, in a corner somewhere, and poof, it was gone.
So I was going to ask you, that strawberry crystal that appeared on the island in my kitchen and then just disappeared later, much to my disappointment. When I had that show with Frank and Grant Cameron and many other people on apports, it suddenly struck me during the show, but I didn't bring it up. The question I have is it possible for apports to just become sort of a liminal object? Liminal means it's neither here nor there. It will never be stationary. It will just always travel. Is that possible, that it will always just be an apport, or objects that are apported, that is the pattern that they will encounter for the rest of their object lives, so to speak?
It's not the apports of my friend. He's had the vast majority have stayed. Some of them have disappeared, but very
Okay.
few of them have disappeared. Now, in terms of, what is this? We can only speculate. We don't know if this is some non-human intelligence that is always around us, that's interacting with us. Like you have, a guardian angel around you that's always interacting with you, and
Yes.
you thought about it, and then boom, it gave you that to say, look, our reality is not what it is. Begin to think a little more complex about our reality. Okay. And it did lead that, you to do that, I'm sure, because once you've had these apports, you start thinking a little bit more deeply about your reality. Okay.
Yes.
Or maybe another hypothesis, the way to look at it is that, look, this is not some external non-human intelligence, but this is your consciousness. Okay. Because our reality is a consciousness-based reality. It's not really primarily a physicalist reality. It's primarily a consciousness-based reality. And so what it is that your consciousness, which is independent of your body, okay, wanted that, you've been wanting it for so long that you wished it, and it appeared. Okay.
Yes.
Now, again, you've heard these theories that we live in a simulated reality.
Yes,
Okay.
I have.
Okay, that entails that there's a computer simulator behind it, that there is a universal mind behind it, whatever this is. We always think of this as an a man-made type of God, where it's like a human with a beard and things of that sort. But we just don't know the vast complexities of what this could be. Okay, it could be just some vast type of super advanced intelligence that has no physical form, that we are part of it. Okay, that we're interacting as part of a conscious-based phenomenon. These are just theories that many PhD physicists are circulating. In MIT alone, there are 3 tenured theoretical physicists that believe in the simulated reality. Okay, and there's countless of other philosophers. I mean, from Plato.
The allegory of the cave you're talking about?
Well, that's just an example. But the whole aspect of the debate of philosophy of the mind, which started with the way before the Greeks. Even with the Indian Vedic philosophy, all the way through Middle Eastern philosophy, through the Greeks and the Romans. This whole concept that our material reality is not primary, that it's consciousness based. So the allegory of the cave is just a Western concept of that Plato, wrote, and which is very well known in Western civilization. So again, what I think is happening is that these types of phenomenon are getting us to step outside of our shoes, comfort zone, and start thinking about a little bit more of the complexities. And this is what the free organization is doing, okay? Because our perspective is, we're not a ufology organization.
Right.
We're an organization that's studying what is consciousness, what is the relationship between consciousness and our cosmology, because we have numerous physicists in our organization, and what is the relationship between consciousness, our cosmology, and what we call the contact modalities. Now, for your audience members, the contact modalities, a very simple way of looking at it is all the different ways that humans are piercing the veil and having contact with non-human intelligence. For example, UFO contact, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, remote viewing, people that have seen and communicate with ghosts and spirits, hallucinogenic journeys. okay, et cetera, et cetera. All of these phenomena are different ways that humans are having contact with non-human intelligence, and we believe that it's all interrelated. Now, the one of the components that they're interrelated is that all of them involve a manipulation of space-time. And by definition, that means that this is multidimensional in nature. Okay. And we also further to add on top of that is that we believe that our reality is consciousness based, which even adds another layer to it. And the reason why we did our academic research study on UFO contact experiencers was that there was absolutely nothing that has been written academically about the UFO contact phenomenon. We actually knew almost nothing about the phenomenon. So how could you then begin to compare the UFO contact experiencers with the experiencers of the near-death experiences, which there's a whole ton of academic literature on? You just couldn't make that comparison. But now we have the basic data to be able to begin to analyze how are they common. And we have identified more than 50 commonalities just between NDEs and UFO contact experiencers.
Can you give us like a quick example that really stand out? A quick 2 or 3 that really jump out at you. Similarities between the two.
There's a whole ton of them, but I'll give you just a few of them. Okay. Let me talk about very, very quickly. Okay. First of all, communication in a near-death experience and communication with UFO-related non-human intelligence. How is it? It's telepathic. It's not mouth to mouth. Also, it's in one's native language. Did you guys ever think about that? Okay. Both of these phenomenon involve an out-of-body experience. In the UFO contact experiencers, 80% of the individuals had an out-of-body experience. In, again, the vast majority of these near-death experiences, it starts off with an OBE. People are seeing their body underneath. Okay. Or people that their consciousness leaves their body. Okay. Also, the number one type of being in our free UFO related study that people have interacted with that I've seen is an energy being. What's the number one being in an NDE? An energy being. Okay. Also, people are seeing spirit forms. That's the number 4 form in the UFO contact experience. That's also one of the major type of entities that individuals are seeing in an NDEs. Also, human looking non-human intelligence. Same thing, that was number 2 in our research study. The grays were only number 3. So here we've got number 1, number 2, and number 4. The energy being, the spirit ghost type of beings, and the human-looking beings in both NDEs and UFO contact. Also, both phenomenon involve medical healings. Okay? In our survey, 50% of the people that answered our survey have had a medical healing by non-human intelligence. In the NDE phenomenon, the literature is literally spread throughout with individuals that had an NDE and were medically healed. Damon Brinkley is a very, very famous case. Suzanne Marjoni is her last name. I forgot her. The most famous case. She had total cancer all over her body. All of a sudden, she had an NDE. The God being that she identified as God told her, "Look, I've already healed you. Tell the doctors when you go back, don't do all this chemotherapy and all this other junk. You're healed." Okay. So when she got back to her body, she told the doctor said, "We're not going to do it anyway because you've only got a few hours to live. You only just came out of your coma." Well, guess what? In 2 weeks, she was walking out of the hospital, totally healed. Okay. Wow. Dr. Eben Alexander. Okay. A medical doctor at the Harvard Medical School. He was a neurosurgeon. Was medically healed because his brain was mush. Okay. His brain was mush. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, he's walking home. Okay. Also, both experiences involve reincarnation with the UFO contact experiences and the NDE phenomenon. They're visions of the future. Both of them involve visions of the future, and both of them involve visions of the past. And I think Hannah, you wanted to talk about that as well. Okay.
Yes.
For example, for the UFO contact experiences, in terms of these visions, the vast majority of the future, people are being shown the ecological destruction of our planet if we don't take care of it. Also, people are having very specific visions of themselves in the future if you don't change. Okay. Now, for the NDE, people are having a life review. They're being shown their whole life instantaneously. Okay. And for many people, it seems like it lasts, many, many, many years. My own father's life reviews, he told me it lasted 20 to 30 years. Same thing with the UFO contact experiences. People are being shown visions of their past, of their childhood. Okay. And they're seeing it. All right. Now, also, both of these experiences involve a total personality transformation, psychological personality transformation for the positive. Okay, that was demonstrated in Dr. Kenneth Ring's book, The Omega Project, in 1986, which is a statistical study where he compared 85 abductees with 85 NDE experiencers. What he found out was that 85% of both groups underwent a complete psychological transformation for the positive. We duplicated 60 of those questions, and now it's not 85 people. Now we had thousands of people that said the same thing. Okay? Taken to a matrix reality. And NDE, you're being taken to a matrix reality. We had almost double the number of people in our free ufology survey that were taken to a matrix reality than people that have had an abduction. Okay? Precognition. Both people returned from contact with heightened precognition skills. Heightened paranormal experiences. Both groups, all of a sudden, we talked about a little bit off the air, have this heightened paranormal experiences after their contact experiences. For both groups, after their contact experiences, they then began to see ghosts and spirits. Okay. Both groups involve a manipulation of electronic devices. Okay. Wearing watches, going on the street lamps, computers, constantly, malfunctioning on people, but especially the watches, the electronic watches, for both the NDE experiences and the UFO contact experiences. Spiritual messages. What we discovered was that 85% of these individuals underwent a complete spiritual transformation. More than 50% of these people were given spiritual messages by non-human intelligence. Well, guess what happens in a near-death experience? The same thing. Okay? Also, for both type of experiences, demonstrate that consciousness is non-local. Consciousness does not begin and start with our brain. For both of these experiences, it shows that we are much more than just our brain. Okay? If you've had an out-of-body experience, that's 100% certified. Okay? You're out of your body, my mind, my consciousness is not my body because my body's down there. Then what the hell is it up here? Okay, it's much more complicated. So consciousness is non-local, is demonstrated by both experiences. Also, both experiences involve a manipulation of space-time. Okay. Also, both experiences involve multi-dimensional reality, multi-dimensional experiences by definition. If there's a manipulation of space-time, you're taken out of your body, you're being drawn to a matrix reality, to a spirit world by definition. So this is just a very quick run through, okay, of the similarities. But yet these topics are not discussed in ufology because ufology is nuts and bolts. Ufology, the field of ufology, has actually contributed very little over the last 75 years to understand this phenomenon. And looking in our 5-year academic research study, what have we discovered? We have discovered so many of our research findings that totally contradict what ufology thinks the phenomenon is. And I haven't discussed that yet because we haven't had that opportunity. But so our reality is much more complicated than just a nuts and bolts ufological approach.
I wanted to ask you, how do you feel, Ray, about the work of Rupert Sheldrake? I know you are familiar with him regarding his morphic resonance theory and how it posits that memory is inherent in nature and natural systems inherit a collective memory from all previous things of their kind. And Sheldrake proposes that it's also responsible for telepathy type interconnections between organisms.
Well, in our second book, which is going to be a theoretical book uh, on, and this is sort of the scientific lingo associated with the second book. Uh, it's going to be titled Beyond Materialism. Okay, Beyond Materialism. Um, Let me give you the formal name of it. Okay,
Okay.
Beyond Materialism, the new paradigm of consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence via the unified contact modalities. What it is you're going to be having over 45 individuals, roughly 15 PhD academics, researchers, about 10 of them, and the rest will be experiencers, telling humanity about their reality is not a material reality. It's a consciousness-based reality, and that they indeed are having all of these contact modalities, okay, and that they're all interrelated. So it's a theoretical book. Now, Rupert Sheldrake wrote a theory which is parallel to Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness. That article, which is going to be roughly 60 pages, is going to be in our new book, and
Ah,
it's pretty much very similar to Rupert Sheldrake's, except both of them wrote it pretty much at the same time, starting in the late 80s, and they were publicizing a series of articles as time went on. And so what it is, it's about information fields. Information fields, that our reality is based upon information fields, that these information fields, our consciousness is able to retrieve them. Okay?
okay.
And these information fields store information. Now, where Rudy Shields comes in is he's an expert in black holes, and what he discovered 30 years ago was that black holes are information repositories. They store information, just like a hard drive. Okay. So then the theory that Edgar and Rudy were working on is how our consciousness is able to use the information fields embedded in the very fabric of our cosmology and take information which is stored in these black holes. Okay. And so what Rupert Sheldrake did is basically took that generalist theory and began to apply it to a lot of different aspects of our reality. And that's where Edgar was going. And he did talk a lot about that. But Edgar was not a very speculative person, okay? But he did, the direction he was going was that our experiences that we're having were consciousness-based experiences. And that we need to be able to understand that phenomenon, because it begins to highlight how all of the contact modalities, NDEs, OBEs, ghosts and spirits, how they're able to interact with the information fields in our reality to interact with us. So
Yeah.
yes, Rupert Sheldrake, and also his article is on our free website as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, and
since you'd brought up Sheldrake, another guy I find kind of interesting is somebody named Tom Campbell. I don't know how familiar you are with his work, but
Yes,
he's the
I'm
guy
very
who wrote
familiar.
my Big
The
Toe.
writings.
Yes, exactly. Theory of everything.
Yeah.
And his position is more like literally we're all information as well. That we're essentially repositories of information. That's I hope I'm not misstating that, but my understanding of his material is that's what he's saying, that
Well,
we're information as well.
What it is that all of these radical thinkers think exactly the same way. Okay, that there is no separation between us and source, God, whatever you might want to call it, that we're actually part of God. And that what Edgar was talking about is how did that mechanism work, of retrieving information to our consciousness, through our consciousness. But Campbell basically does not talk about non-human intelligence, and rarely he talks about the contact modalities. What we're doing is we're putting all the picture together. We're throwing in consciousness. We're talking about our cosmology. We're talking about information fields. We're talking about non-human intelligence, and we're talking about the contact modalities. And no one has ever done that before. This book is going to be the first attempt to present this. Now, what it is that many of these advanced thinkers, people like even Raymond Moody, Jeffrey Long, Kenneth Ring, the very, very famous near-death experiencers, they've all talked about these things among themselves. Jeffrey Mishloff, we have Dean Radin, Edgar Mitchell, Rudy Shields, Gary Schwartz. All of these individuals are advisors to Free. Dr. Claude Swanson, PhD physicist from Princeton University, is a member of our advisory board. They all think the same way. But what it is that no one has really put academic articles together before. It was just things that they speculated and they talked among themselves, and they might have had an article here and there that talked about a separate component of it. But what we're having now is 45 chapters that talks about the whole integration of all these things.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Robert Monroe, who created the Monroe Institute. My understanding is he created that institute out of having had out-of-body experiences, and I understand that his organization was created to explore and understand better consciousness. How do you feel about that organization? Do you feel that they were able to get very far regarding their research on that topic?
Well, I don't know a hell of a lot about the research studies there. What I do know is that there are various organizations that have continued to do academic research on OBEs and consciousness. We gave up Dr. Bob Davis, who's a retired professor of neuroscience, also a member of our board and co-author of a paper that we published at the Journal for the Society for Scientific Exploration, which is a peer-reviewed academic research article. We gave a presentation of a paper that we did about 2.5 years ago to this institute called Society for Consciousness Studies, I believe it's called. But they have a journal called the Journal of Consciousness. And that our paper was also, a different version of the paper was also published there. And so they've been doing for the last 20 years, continuation the work of Robert Monroe. And they have managed to be able to, like Robert Monroe, stimulate out-of-body experiences. They're able to teach out-of-body experiences. But what it is that we just don't fully understand it. What we know is that it involves non-local consciousness. It involves that your spirit, your consciousness, whatever you might want to call it, is outside of the body. It can travel. Now, the most, we're going to be having 2 articles in our book by highly advanced OBE experiencers. Now, both of these individuals, over the many, many, many years, have learned to control their OBEs. They first started hovering above their bed, then in their house, then in their neighborhood, okay? And then they went off to, outer regions. They even gone in outer space, and these people now are doing interdimensional travels. They go into other realities. I know of 5 major individuals that are doing this, okay? One is a medical doctor, the smartest person I've ever met in my life, okay? We're talking number 1 in his class at, college, medical school. I mean, a genius, okay? Has been doing this since this person was 18 years old. And what he does is he lives in that other reality. That other dimension. So we know very little about it. But in our paper that we're going to be having, we'll be presenting some of these journeys and some of these discussions for the first time. So at least people can begin to understand that it's part of the contact modalities, that involves consciousness, involves the manipulation of space-time, and it deals with our relationship between consciousness and our multidimensional reality.
Psychoanalysts Dr. Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung both had interesting things to say about the subconscious. Do you feel like the subconscious mind has anything to do with anything we've been talking about? One thing I wanted to mention to you is it's my understanding that it's possible that we use 5% of our conscious brain and then we use of our mind, and then 95%, the rest of that is subconscious related. How do you feel about the possibility of subconscious mind playing into whatever it is we're talking about, all of the topics we've covered?
Yeah, again, I'm not an expert in that field.
Okay.
Dr. Jeffrey Mishloff would probably be a better person to discuss these things. But let's touch upon a couple of things.
Okay.
One is Carl Jung's The Collective Unconsciousness, okay,
Mhm.
which is, again, a highly abstract theory of how our consciousness interrelates with our multidimensional reality, how things are possibly recreated. And again, he didn't fully understand how our reality works. No one does. Okay, but he was just trying to come up with theories of trying to explain things, some of the paranormal things that he had heard of, and he even wrote a book called Jung on UFOs. Again.
Yes.
Alluding to that as again part of the collective unconsciousness. Now, the other thing in terms of dreams, okay, Stanley Krippner again. Well, let's mention him. He first became well known by doing these academic studies on dreams and the relationship to dreams and our reality and our subconscious. And I'm not a psychologist. My daughter loves psychology. She wants to study that when she eventually graduates from college. But again, all of these topics that we're talking about, we can only speculate about them. I imagine that there's kernels of truths between a lot of these concepts that we've been discussing. But I'm a type of person that I'm very how should I say uh, hesitant
Maybe. Yeah.
to accepting a lot of theories out there unless I have something to back it up. And from our research study, now we've got data. It's not just one person. We've got thousands of people that are saying the same thing. So at least we can say that, look, thousands of people, this percent have told us this information. So we can then hypothesize that, and also we did studies in our research study where we looked upon different geographic areas. We had a PhD psychologist who's a statistician, PhD statistician, that looked at the different country groupings. He put all the people in the U.S. together, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, not Great Britain, the United Kingdom, continental Europe, Canada as a separate group, and then Australia and New Zealand. And he looked at how people answered all of the questions. And what he found out was that there was very little percentage difference no matter what country you were for each of the questions. It was less than 10%. So if in the US they answered whatever at 55%, in Great Britain they might have answered at 65%. Okay, in Canada might have been 57%. So then we could make a hypothesis that look, these people are having the same type of experiences all over the world for each of these questions. So and then what we've just been talking about is a lot of theory, a lot of speculation. The reason why is because all of the members of our organization, all of us have the position that we have no idea what the hell is going on. We're totally clueless.
Yeah.
And that if anyone comes out like they know it all, okay, run away from that person.
Right.
Because they're total fraud. Total fraud they try to push on you. We're just beginning to understand what questions to ask, okay, let alone what answers. So all these questions that you're talking about, we can only speculate about. But that's all those questions that you're asking are the questions that we need to move forward about. Not how big was the UFO? How fast was it flying? Was it cylindrical shape? Please, what has that given us in 75 years?
Very good point. Wanted to ask you about...
Ray, let me jump in here and ask you a real quick question. You had mentioned that people who have had these types of experiences, seeing an improvement in precognition, that type of thing. Have you been able to put them to any kind of test, like a Zener card test or anything along those lines, to see what that improvement might be, or if they scored better than random chance, that type of thing?
I know that Dean Radin has tried to do that, but the difficulty is getting someone that just had a UFO contact experience through his laboratory, or having someone that's having a near-death experience, to his laboratory or to the laboratory of Gary Schwartz. That's if they had money, big mega bucks money, you'd be able to fly these people and do these types of studies. But just for our free research study, which took 5 years to do, we had no funding whatsoever. It was all self-funding. The actual members of our research committee were funding these initiatives. So it's and Dean Radin, he works with a shoestring budget as well. So the answer to your question is no. And also in terms of the changes of improvements, what I mentioned were the psychological profile changes of these individuals. And maybe if you don't mind, if I could go a little bit into that.
Yeah.
Because these are very, very important findings. Again, what has happened is that UFO-related contact with non-human intelligence resulted in a positive transformation of the experiencer. And I stated before, we asked close to 80 questions in our research study, which we borrowed from the Omega Project. It's a book published in 1988 by Dr. Kenneth Ring, who is a tenured professor at the University of Connecticut, one of the world's leading experts on near-death experiences. And the name of the book is the Omega Project, Near-Death Experiences, UFO Encounters, and the Mind at Large. Okay, remember we were talking about the mind at large topic. Well, he speculates about, and again, he compared 85 people that had NDEs with 85 people that had an abduction experience. And what both he found out and we found out in our research study, 73% of the individuals had a positive. We asked the question, how did ET contact change your life? Okay, 73% said it had a positive effect in changing their life. These are all the questions. 70% said it had a neutral effect. Okay, slightly negative effect was 6%, and highly negative effect in changing their life was 4%. Now, let me go into some of the specifics. Okay. Depending on the question, it was between 73 to 85% of the individuals underwent a profound psychological profile change for the positive. Now, let me give you an example. These are the people that the question is, since I first became interested in my UFO experiences, okay, this particular phenomenon increased, okay, either strongly increased or increased somewhat. So my desire to help others, 75%. My compassion for others, 80%. My appreciation of the ordinary things of life, 74%. My sensitivity to the suffering of others, 78%. My concern with spiritual matters, 83%. My desire to achieve a higher consciousness, we're talking 89%. Okay. My appreciation of nature, 84%. My spiritual feelings, 83%. My concern with the welfare of planet Earth, 85%. My understanding of what life is all about, okay, 82%. My personal sense of purpose in life, 78%. My concern with ecological matters, 80%. Okay. Now, let's look at the opposite, things that decreased. Okay. My concern with material things, all of a sudden, they didn't care about money, getting a new Mercedes every year. Okay. My interest in organized religion, my competitive tendencies, my fear of death, my desire to become well known. Now, let me ask both of you a question. Okay. This is the profile of someone that, in my opinion, I would want to have as my best friend.
Yeah.
I would want to have as my wife, my brother, my parents, you know, how you want to raise your kids, your children.
My co-host.
Your co-host, anybody. Okay. Now,
Right.
the question, what would happen if these ETs did that to everybody in the world? What type of a world would we have?
I would love it.
Okay. Wouldn't we have a world with no suffering, with no people going hunger, with no highly a wide range of income, with people going, you know, starving to death, okay, with people getting ahead of each other and just, you know, doing anything to get ahead of them, okay, people that are non-spiritual versus people that are now highly spiritual, okay, people with no fear of death, okay. Now that's from my perspective, let these ETs do this to all of humanity. Okay. Now, again, this is 4,200 people that took our survey from over 100 countries. Again, mainstream materialist ufology is totally clueless about this. Okay, they're still chasing the latest New York Times article that came out yesterday about, this new revelation of a pilot, this one pilot that they interviewed have seen a UFO. Big fucking deal. Okay, I've seen UFOs up close, 30 feet away. My wife has called down like 4 or 5 UFOs. Okay. My daughter has seen a UFO right next to me, 30 feet away. Big fucking deal. Okay. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world that are seeing UFOs. Doctors, lawyers, physicians. Dr. Joseph Brooks is a physician. We have 4 physicians that are part of the free organization. All of them are experiencers. I've already spoken in the last month to 3 physicians. The latest one was a pediatrician. Okay, who has had tons of paranormal experiences. Twice she's seen huge UFOs that blotted out the stars in the sky. She was in a car with her husband. Okay, so give me a freaking break with this bullshit New York Times article. Disclosure is taking place, but it's taking place from the bottom up. We don't need your bullshit military intelligence control disclosure. Take that shit and put it back where you found it.
I'm just listening. I'm just here for the donuts and free coffee. I love listening to you.
Yeah.
By the way,
I didn't reach the mute button in time there. When
that's okay.
Don't delete it.
No. We're on YouTube. You can swear your head off, right?
Don't delete it because it is fucking bullshit. Okay? You talk to Joseph Brooks, a retired medical doctor, telling you he's fucking seen UFOs, tons of UFOs. You talk to doctors, lawyers, professors, okay? People from all walks of life. And all of a sudden, the New York Times is coming out with this, and everybody in ufology is going batshit crazy. You know? Please. They're just trying to control the narrative now because now people are speaking out publicly about this phenomenon. Okay? Disclosure is taking place from the bottom up. We don't need no fucking government disclosure panel in Washington, D.C. to tell us what the fuck is going on because true experiencers are living it they've lived these experiences. And we're just as credible as a fighter pilot. Okay, I went to fucking Berkeley for a PhD. Okay, so don't give me this bullshit that this fighter pilot is more credible than I am.
I was just gonna say I love listening to you, Ray.
Chant, you were left speechless by that.
I know
that's a rare thing. Even I can't accomplish that.
Look, I don't make a living out of this. I don't make a living.
We don't either.
I'm a tax attorney with the IRS out of Miami, Florida. Okay? My supervisor knows about my experiences. He had a paranormal ghost experience himself that he told me. Okay? So, please, and I'm almost about to retire. I'm almost 63 years old. I only have a few years left. They can't do shit to me unless I screw up. Okay? So, again, I stand by my words.
Keep it going. Keep it going.
We do too. We love you for saying them. By the way, Ray has the honor of having said the F word repeatedly since I've been on with you, Frank. That's the second time. Dean Alioto was the movie director. He was the first person that actually did that.
Yeah, but I bet you I said it more times than he did.
Oh, yes.
So give me the fucking trophy.
Yeah. People are under the false impression that we have to adhere to those pussy broadcast standards, you know.
You know what it is? You know what it is, Frank and Chant? I get so upset by that stuff, okay? I get so upset because it's being front page on the New York Times, and yet they won't even give the decency of interviewing Dr. Rudy Shields, who's the director of our organization, who's a 79-year-old emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University for over 45 years. He has just as many peer-reviewed publications as Stephen Hawking, okay? But yet they won't even go near him. Claude Swanson, who has a PhD in physics from Princeton University, the same university that Albert Einstein taught when he came from Germany, they won't have the decency to interview him. Okay? Dr. Gary Schwartz, Okay, this man got a PhD from Harvard. Okay, he was a professor at Yale University, a full professor. Not he's trying to get tenured. No, he was a tenured professor with tons of publications. They don't have the indecency of interviewing him. I could go on and on and on with all these academics, and yet they interviewed this guy who was a pilot. He was just a fucking pilot. That's it. And he retired after 10 years. And he's like, they're using him as like the father of disclosure, you know? Bullshit. I could give him right now tons of retired medical doctors, lawyers, attorneys, retired professors that have called down a UFO and have seen UFOs. So if you really want to get the real story, please get out of that military controlled operation that people are being spoon fed and wake up to reality.
I think you should have your own talk show.
Yeah. Yeah, well, get your own thing going, Ray.
It's about time that someone says it, right? Okay?
Yeah.
It's about time because everyone thinks the same way under the table. They talk about it hush hush. You know, I just don't give a shit.
And we love you for it.
Yeah.
It's I can hear the New York coming out of him. He spent a lot of years up there. I can hear it coming out
Hell
of him.
yeah. I was raised in West New York. West New York,
yeah.
on the other side of the Lincoln Tunnel.
Oh my gosh.
So, Ray, were you still living up there during the Hudson Valley cases, or had you already moved south by that point?
Let me see. I was there in. I went to Rutgers. I left there in '79.
Okay, yeah, I think it's
'79.
I can't. That happened later, I think.
And then I returned back to New York in '88 after I left Berkeley.
Yeah.
So towards the end, the fall of '88, I moved back to New York, and we lived in Queens at that time.
Do you remember all that? Because it was up further up the river a little bit. I
had no idea that these things were taking place.
Yeah.
I had zero interest in these things.
I know the area a little bit up near Indian Point where the nuclear plant is, and all up through that area. That's where a lot of those sightings were taking place.
Yeah, that was the boondocks, you know. I went up there when I was a little kid, you know, like to Bear Mountain and stuff like that. But,
yeah, Bear Mountain, exactly.
Yeah, and so, but no, I had no interest in any of these things that we're talking about until 2012. I thought all of you were crazy.
Oh, okay. So it was that recent. I got you. Okay.
It was 2012. That's it, man.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
It's like I know a good psychiatrist that's got some good pills to give you, you know, because I know family members that are taking them, and they'll do wonders, you know. That would have been my attitude. I was totally clueless.
I just love listening to Ray. I don't care what he's talking about. Ray, would you mind giving an abbreviated version of what occurred to you and what caused you to initiate yourself into the process of learning where you're at?
I like that word, initiate. It was more like a 2x4.
Okay.
I call it an ET 2x4 that knocked the shit out of me, you know? What it was, we had a dog that was 15 years old, a Jack Russell Terrier. She had been quite ill for about a year and a half. She was taking Viagra for her heart. She was taking diuretics to flush out the excess liquid in her body. She had severe arthritis. She couldn't run. She couldn't jump. But we just didn't want to euthanize her because she was like our first daughter. And so, you know, all that medication cost a lot of money, and plus taking her to the vet all the time. And so then one evening on a Saturday night at about 8 o'clock, she became totally paralyzed. And so then I called our vet and I described to him what was happening. He says, what you're telling me, it seems like she had a cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke. And he says, look, I'll open up the office tomorrow so we can euthanize her. So then my wife had come from a 3-day retreat at the Catholic Church. It was all praying. That's all you do for 3 days is pray, you know. And me, it was like the only way she got me to the church is if, you know, she grabbed me by the you-know-what, you know, and said, you're not going to get any dinner, you know, for the next month unless you go to church with me, you know. So that's how I would go. And so so she already had come back from 3 days of prayer. And so I told her what had happened. She was very depressed. She started to cry. Immediately she started to pray. So all night she was praying. At like 12 o'clock, I went to sleep. You know, that's her stuff. Let her pray away, you know. Now I know that there's power in prayer. But back then, I was totally clueless about these things. So in the morning at 6 o'clock, the dog was barking. We both woke up. We checked her out, and we thought maybe she was, was better. Maybe it was just a temporary thing. But no, she was still totally paralyzed. So I went back to sleep, and my wife carried her down the stairs to see if she could go to the bathroom. So in the living room, in the corner of the living room, my wife saw an object that was semi-physical, but was in and out of reality. It was like silverish and like moonish color, semi-transparent, but sometimes it would be more physical. Other times it would be less physical. And it looked like an upside down U. Approximately, if I recall, it was about a foot wide by a foot and a half in height. Just picture like an upside U, semi-metallic, phasing in and out of reality, hovering 4 feet off the ground. And then she thought it was an angel because she had been praying all night, for a miracle. She says, "This is my angels. Come and visit me." She started, right there praying. And then from that object, these two green lights started beaming up on her like a beam, okay, like a laser beam. And then it shot from its side white fluorescent light. So then she started calling me, not because she was scared, but she wanted me to see her angel. She was totally convinced that was an angel. And it turned out that she was correct. Okay. So then, Ray. And I totally ignored her. She then went upstairs and she hauled me out of bed, physically grabbed me. And what is it? What is it? You'll see. You'll see. What is it? What is it? You'll see. And so we both went down the stairs. She was walking ahead of me, like a couple of steps, like 3 or 4 steps in front of me. And then when she got down to the living room, again, what I'm going to tell you now happened instantaneously. So as I'm saying, it takes a long time to explain it, but this took, fractions of a second. All of a sudden, she disappears in front of me with the dog. Then immediately, some type of intelligence took over my mind, my consciousness. I didn't care that my wife disappeared, that the dog disappeared. I then had all of my peripheral vision was gone. The only thing I could see was one corner of the living room. It's sort of like as if you put you get your hand, you put a circle, like a funnel, and you put it to your eye, like you're looking through a binocular. Right. Everything around was all dark. It was only that center spot, okay? And so in that center spot was what I call an energy being, okay? It was roughly 2.5 feet wide by a foot in height. It was rectangular in shape, but didn't have any edges because it was pure energy. 4 feet off the ground, multicolored, numerous colors, and they were all waving, like a desert mirage. You know how it waves? Mm-hmm. It was all these colors were waving. It was semi-transparent. Okay, and then I did something for 6 months. I didn't understand why I did it, but basically I looked at that object, I squinted at it, and I waved my hand at it, and I said, bullshit. This is what you got me down here for this crap? And I went, And then I turned around. I walked up the stairs. I went to bed. I immediately got to bed. I put my hands on my chest. I looked straight up at the ceiling, and I was knocked out. Okay? 45 minutes later, I know it's 45 because when I got downstairs, I eventually looked at the clock, right? 45 minutes later, I woke up, and I was fully conscious. I got my mind back. Okay, I ran down the stairs and poof, my wife is in the middle of the living room saying in Spanish, "Hallelujah, hallelujah, Los Ángeles la curaron, Los Ángeles la curaron. Hallelujah, hallelujah, the angels cured her, the angels cured her." Okay, and the dog was running around the whole living room, not like the dog that she was before, because she couldn't run, she couldn't jump, she was like a teenager. Running around the whole living room, jumping and celebrating. She would pick her up and dance with her and hug her and kiss her and put her down, and she would continue celebrating, and the dog was running around the whole living room. Now, for me, it was like an atom bomb exploded in my head. Okay? Boom! Your whole conception of reality is totally destroyed. Okay? You don't know whether this was a dream still going on, okay? Whether that was a dream, you don't know what the hell is happening, right? So then I began to ask her tons of questions. I said, "What the hell happened? Where were you? You disappeared." "I didn't disappear. I was here the whole time." I said, "No." And she says, "It was the angels. They came and they cured her." I said, "What angels? I didn't see any angels." She said, "You were there. You saw it." And I said, what I saw, and I described the energy being, but you weren't there. when I saw that? You were gone. She says, I didn't see that. Then she described what she saw. What had happened, it was only 6 months later, after our third major experience, that I called MUFON. I was on the internet and I found out that there's this organization. And then this lady named Mary Margaret Zimmer came by my house. She was a retired school teacher. Her husband is retired. He worked for the Hurricane Center. He was a meteorologist. He had just retired. He was an elderly man. They were both elderly, and she came first. He came the second time they came to visit, and so she took down all of our information, and then I asked her. I said, and then she told us what happened with your wife is she had missing time. And then she went on to explain it. I had no idea what missing time was. Okay, we had no conception of what that was, and so she then explained it, went into the details. So for my wife, she had gone down the stairs in front of me. She then looked down. The dog was running around, and she started celebrating. Okay, she had no idea where she was those 45 minutes. Okay, she thought I was behind her the whole time. Okay.
Oh,
all right. And so, initially I thought it was paranormal related. So I was on the internet, 8 hours a day on the internet, paranormal this, paranormal that, paranormal this. And then I said maybe it was UFO related because in Spanish she said, se parecía como una pequeña nave. It looked like a small craft. Okay. And then later on, she said she could have sworn that there was people inside that craft. Okay. But that was much later on when she was like thinking about it. Okay. So, but then I said, maybe it's UFO related, but UFOs are supposed to be outside. They're supposed to be these big things, Well, why was this thing inside our living room when it was small, And so it was total bedlam and confusion, okay? And it wasn't until 2 months later that the dog woke my wife up at 3:30 in the morning, okay? My wife then got up and went down the stairs and tried to open the back door, where we had a little doggy door, to go into the back. She didn't want to go there. She was jumping on the front door, which she never did unless we had her chain, right? So then my wife opened the front door. She went down the stairs with the dog. And then she heard this huge, gigantic noise that lasted like a minute. She said it was like a 747 jet was right above her. And then after that stopped, she looked up, and it was a huge, gigantic UFO. And this one was physical. It was like the Goodyear blimp. And she had colored, she says, oh, my angels came and visited me last night. They came in a beautiful angelic craft. And it had stained glass windows just like our church, And then I asked her to describe it and to draw it. And she drew like a Goodyear blimp, except on the edges it had all these stained glass windows. And so I said, you didn't see angels, you saw a UFO. She goes, oh, you wouldn't understand. You're an atheist, And so that was and back then I hadn't had my ET contact experiences where they gave me spirituality. That's a lengthy discussion,
Understood.
of how that took place. But that was the first time that I said, this is UFO related. Okay. And then about a month and a half later, she went to Mexico. She stayed a month in Mexico with her family. With my daughter. And 4 times she called down her angels. And guess what? 4 times they appeared. Okay.
Wow.
And then one time she described 3 human-looking beings that were 7 to 8 feet tall that were dressed in white monk's robes. She said that they didn't look human, but they were very close to human. And they had bald heads. Their head was not like a normal human head. And that they floated right in front of her. They didn't walk. They floated. And at a certain distance, they dematerialized and disappeared. And then, and she was having tons of these, how should I call it, precognition abilities. Tons of them. It was like months and months. She detected a tumor in my back.
Wow.
Okay. She like put her hand on my back. You got a tumor back there. I said, what? I don't feel anything, And then she touched it, no. But she then put her hand on top of it, like she read it. And you got a tumor. I went to the doctor. Yeah, boy, you got a tumor back there. Needs operation. And he cut open like the surgeon, like an 8-inch scar in my back and took out this huge tumor. And I always tell people that my wife knifed me. She got pissed off at me. But then when we were going to our first ufology conference in Sebring, Maine, in 2013, that was right before I had my out-of-body experience where they brought me to this matrix reality. It was like a couple of days afterwards. And that's where I met Grant Cameron. And he introduced me to Chris Bledsoe. Okay. He called Chris Bledsoe right in front of me because he said, I just came back from my home of Chris Bledsoe and his dog was healed right in front of him, right in front of Grant. Right. And then there's another story later on with Chris Bledsoe, a crazy story involving me and him in advanced physics, which I won't go into. That's very private. But anyway, I was going to go to this conference where that's where I met Kathy Martin. I hadn't become friends with her at the conference. It was much later on. Denise Stoner, Grant Cameron spoke, and it was a conference by Paola Harris. Okay. And so and it was at this workshop that Yvonne Smith held in the morning where people were talking about their experiences. So my wife and I talked about our experience. And it was Grant that came to us afterwards. He says, I just came from the home of Chris Bledsoe, where his dog was like spouting blood all over the freaking place. And Chris grabbed the towel and put it right on him. And the blood stopped. But we tried looking for the cut. There was no cut. But if he was spewing blood all over the place, And then the dog was wagging his tail, running around like nothing had happened. It was totally healed. It was a totally healing right in front of him. Okay. So that's when he called Chris Bledsoe right in front of me, And so anyway, a week before that event, that conference, I'm not going up there. It's like a 3-hour trip. The car's going to explode. I said, what do you mean the car's going to explode? She said, the air conditioner's not working. And I put my hand on the condition. Look, I'm freezing my freaking ass off. Look at this. Look at the hand, What do you mean the air conditioner's not working? I ain't going up there. The car's going to explode. I ain't going up there. Finally, a few days before the conference, because it took me almost a month to convince her to go up there, I said, look, sweet, it's going to be a honeymoon. Okay, we're going to spend most of the time in bed instead of at the conference. And then she said, okay, I'll go, And and so, because, couples rarely we get out, And so here we are. I said, shit, man, I got to make this thing happen. Right? So I brought the car to the mechanic, right? Just to shut her up. Well, the mechanic said, well, guess what? You're lucky you didn't go to that trip because the engine would have exploded. All right. So these are just examples of my wife, okay, of these things. But yet our survey came up with these things. Tons of people were having these precognition skills. And it's not just UFO contact experiences. It's NDE contact experiences, okay? And again, mainstream ufology, these people are totally clueless, okay? All these people that I'm going to be going to all these conferences to talk at. I look at them, and in my head, I'm thinking, you're fucking clueless, All right.
I'm still laughing about what he said about earlier. I won't mention it. Anyway, we both.
Know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Okay?
I do.
It's hard for couples to get away.
Frank and I both know Chris Bledsoe. He's a wonderful person. We love him. He's so fantastic. Such a warm-hearted person. Very caring, very loving, very giving, very good family man, and has nothing but the highest respect for people. And he just treats people really well. And we just really adore him.
Yeah, I love Chris, and I love his wife too.
Yes.
And later on, off the air, well, it's a very, very lengthy conversation. I might tell you, how this whole thing with Chris got together. But again, it's high strangeness on top of high strangeness from both of us, not just him, from both of us. And we maintained a lifelong link because of these two cases of high strangeness, which forced me to go up there to his house.
Well, Ray, let me jump in and ask you this. Do you think when you get together with other folks, and you've talked about having these experiences with Mrs. Hernandez, do you think when a couple of you or more get together, that's kind of a force multiplier in terms of bringing this type of high strangeness out?
Oh, I definitely think, especially with CE5, when you do CE5, it can't be these huge groups of 200 people, okay? It has to be a small group, and if you get people that live like paranormal lives, high-level experiencers, you're going to have a show, okay? You guys know Mike Marburg?
I do not know.
Okay.
No.
Okay, he's a Princeton graduate, Okay, he's an attorney in North Florida. Again, New York Times interview Mike. Okay, he graduated from Princeton. Okay,
Okay.
New York Times interview. I forgot. I always mispronounce her name. The Nancy the Tutra. Okay,
Oh
another
yeah, yeah.
Princeton
She's in
grad.
North Jersey. I know her.
Correct. Another Princeton grad. Hollis Polk, another Princeton grad, major contact experiencer. She then went to Harvard to get an MBA from Harvard. Okay. All these are just examples off the top of,
Interview you.
okay.
You'll give him some great quotes.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are all high level experiencers.
Oh
I
sure, sure.
brought a people of 10 people from Florida. Most of them were high level experiencers to go up there. The problem was that we went there last year in February, okay? Cold as hell. We were freezing our asses off, right?
Oh yeah.
So everybody by 12 o'clock went in. They said, screw this. And so at 12:30, something in my head said, go out there again, which I did, okay? Well, 15 minutes later, guess what appears 100 feet above us, okay?
Right.
It an object that was twice the size of a school bus, okay, that flew directly right above us, 100 meters above us. It was like the moon, except it was very long. And one guy goes, look, it's got no wings, it's got no wings, okay? So that's what happens when you get, hardcore experiencers together. And Mike is a hardcore experiencer. And again, New York Times, please, you're going to the wrong sources, my friends, okay?
Wanted to ask you, what do you think the takeaway is for your wife regarding what happened to her? Do you think that I can imagine it actually changed her in many ways, but what's the moral of the story for her?
Well, it's very, very difficult. First of all, she doesn't want to talk about these things because to her, it all reverts back to God, reverts back to source. And I agree with her. Okay, except she sees it through a religious, semi-religious lens, not the full hardcore Catholic religious lens, because she's seen the UFOs, she's seen the crafts, she's seen these entities, so she knows we're not just talking about the Bible verbatim. We're talking a little bit more complex than the Bible, okay? But she says that the way that she grew up going to the church since she was little. Okay, they lived in the church, her family. So that's how her way of connecting with God. Okay, and so she tells me that, look, I understand that this is full of shit, that is full of shit. The priest this, the priest that, whatever. But from her own perspective, that's how she is able to communicate. But she communicates with God all the time right here in her house. She goes outside, she hugs trees. She never kills any animals, just like I do, even little bugs, even ants. Okay, I mean, she loves animals, plants. She doesn't destroy any plants, whatever, because she knows that there's God in of them. Okay,
Yes.
now these are not purely religious, Catholic religious types of concepts.
No.
These are
Yeah.
more people that are spiritually evolved. So that's how my wife is a very complex personality, but she doesn't want to talk about them, just like so many people, because again, it gets from. It takes her out of the plane of reality of dealing with our daughter, raising our daughter, having to deal with our reality. It gets her out of the comfort zone.
So, a question I have for you is,
Yeah.
a person who may find themselves in your position years ago, where your mind was trying to wrap itself around this strange surreality that was happening to you, where the person you loved disappeared for a moment, and then you saw a strange being that was translucent, and then it seemed solid or more solid. And you had these strange experiences that occurred multiple times throughout from that point on forward. When that happens to a person and they can't deal with it, what advice do you have to give to them? Can
Okay.
they reach out to your organization so they can learn more about what's going on?
Yes, we used to have many volunteers, but again, it's a lot of work trying to maintain that going. And I tell people, just shoot me an email. I'll send you the free copy of Chapter 1. Okay, so you can read it. It's 120 pages. I will send you a 5-page summary of our research findings. I will send you a copy of our peer-reviewed publication that we've published. Okay, and I will even talk to you. People. Every week I talk to you. Like I told you, as a matter of fact, oh goodness, tomorrow I'm speaking with another medical doctor. Let me just tell you, she's from Australia. Yeah, she's a retired medical doctor from Australia. Okay. Uh, 2 weeks ago, I spoke to a retired medical doctor that lives in New Hampshire. Okay. Uh, the pediatrician lives in a Midwestern state. Okay. She's in her early 60s. I mean, I could go on and on and on. People call me all the time. And and again, people call me, wanting someone to talk, so trying to get answers to all of this. And what I thought is that, look, the world's biggest jigsaw puzzle. There aren't any answers to this. I could only tell them what I and the other members of our free organization hypothesize, and the data from our research study, that this is not, it should not be seen as a scary phenomenon. That the overwhelming number of people has been totally transformative. Over many, many years, they see it as a positive phenomenon. Initially, 36% viewed it as negative, but then towards the end, it's less than 5% view it as highly negative. Okay. um, and on and on and on. So I try to tell people what thousands of people all over the world are saying, so it relieves their fear. So you could send an email to info@experiencer.com. Org. Info@experiencer.org. Info@experiencer.org. And I will get your email, and I will put you on our mailing list, and I will send you a free copy of our 120-page chapter 1 from our 820-page book. The name of our book is titled Beyond UFOs. That's Beyond UFOs, the science of consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence.
And then
And that's available through Amazon.
The
and you got the
website
second
also.
book coming out. Do you have a published date for that?
Yeah, let me go to the website. Our website is down now. It should be back up in a couple of days because we're working
I
on
was
it.
going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, our website is consciousnessandcontact.org. Consciousnessandcontact.org. We have numerous articles there written by both experiencers and researchers. And we have much of our data on our website. And you could also download not only chapter 1, but also many other chapters. One is the chapter on medical healings that was written by Preston Dennett and Dr. Joseph Burks. And also, you can download the chapter by the late godfather of the paranormal, Brad Steiger. He wrote the conclusion to our book. Brad wrote more than 220 books, mainly on everything of involving the contact modalities, from UFOs to reincarnation to ghosts and spirits to the whole works. Out of body experiences, near death experience. That was Brad Steiger. He wrote that book.
Yes.
So yes, please do reach out to me. I will send you the free copy of that chapter, and I will certainly chat with you. Now, in my case, for an entire year, I had no one to talk to. Okay. My experiences lasted approximately 2 years. Okay. But in those 2 years, it was like, 63 years of experiences compacted into those 2 years. It was nonstop, to the point where after I had an experience that involved reincarnation, past lives, and mission here on Earth, okay, I just freaked out and I began to get drunk for an entire week. Okay. I just couldn't handle it anymore until whatever this intelligence is that's working with me managed to send me a savior. I won't get into these details, okay? But it's someone that basically got me back on track. And this person was another high-profile experiencer.
Got it.
Right. And, I actually had the pleasure of interviewing you earlier. I think it was last year. And what I had done was I had heard about you from many people and heard such wonderful things about you. They have nothing but the deepest respect for you. And I really wanted to interview you. So what I asked you is if I could do a text-based interview and just submit questions to you. And you were so kind. You actually went over them very carefully in a very thoughtful manner and answered as many as you felt were relevant to what you and the free organization does. And I just want to really thank you for having done that.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity, because what we're trying to do, that both of you know, is to create a new paradigm. We're presenting a new paradigm of our reality and a new paradigm of viewing these paranormal experiences. And it's totally radical, and it's very, very difficult to understand. I mean, when you're talking that consciousness is primary, that's some deep shit. Okay. That people have a very difficult time of wrapping themselves around with. And just like this very prominent speaker in the UFO field, whenever he hears someone talking about the paranormal aspects of it, totally dismissive of it, because that's not science, that's not real science, that's impossible. And this is a guy that appears at most of these major UFO conferences, and he just repeats the same historical bullshit over and over again. Okay. And so someone that's such a materialist, nuts and bolts person, trying to act like he's the world's authority on this topic, I look that guy straight in the eye, and I say to myself, you are freaking clueless. And so by you allowing me to do that allows me the opportunity to present this totally radical, visionary way of viewing our reality. And it's not my way either. This is all of the members of our board of directors, mainly PhD academics at the highest level, and thousands of experiencers, high-level experiencers that are living paranormal realities.
Wanted to mention somebody when I asked you during that text-based interview. I'll go ahead and repeat the question I asked you, and that was, who are some of the iconic ufologists you admire and respect regarding their serious research? By the way, that term ufologist, I'm sorry to have used that, but I should have just said, who are some of the people that you admire and respect regarding their serious research? And that is Dr. Jacques Vallée.
Yes, most definitely, 110%.
Can you tell us why?
Because over 40 years ago, he said, I do not believe that what we're dealing with is ET. Okay? We're dealing with some type of physical entity that comes from some type of physical planet. Okay? What he hypothesized, and he never said it directly, he always said it indirectly, that we're dealing with some consciousness-based non-human intelligence that's might be multidimensional. And the best way of him phrasing this is that we just do not understand space-time. He said that in numerous of interviews. We just do not understand space-time. Now, what did he mean by that? What he meant was that these experiences that we're dealing with involves a manipulation of space-time, of both space, which means like a multi-dimensional aspect, and time, that we're not dealing with that we're dealing with the past, present, and future simultaneously. Okay, so that involves possibility of reincarnation of the future and of the past and now, that there is no now. Okay, because there is no time. So Vallée had it down pat. He also said that this is a program that's being undertaken. Okay, a program on humanity. Now, a program can be involved that there is some non-human intelligence, whatever you might call it, source, okay, the universal mind, whatever, that's interacting with humanity via, in terms of a changing of an evolution. So what they're doing is that they're slowly changing and evolving us, okay? So he understood it that a program is taking place. And I agree with that, okay? And I think the program is a program for us to avoid our self-destruction. Okay, for us to become more loving with each other, less materialistic, to protect our planet. Exactly those changes that I talked about. Okay, I think what they did is that they did an experiment of just a few people. Okay, of a small sample to see if it works, and lo and behold, it is working very, very well. So my perspective now, let's do it on everybody now. Okay, because if not, we as humans are not going to be lasting on this life. Pretty much longer. I think the New York Times came out, one of the very few things that they did that was good, they came out with an article a couple of weeks ago, talked about more than 1 million species of wildlife and plant life that's going extinct right now. 1 million, okay, as we speak. So imagine that over the next 100 years, okay? We talked about the elephant, the lion, the big game becoming totally extinct. Okay, I think Botswana just allowed elephant hunting again. Give me a break. How many elephants are there alive in this world? But because some king of politician of Botswana is getting paid under the table, hundreds of thousands of dollars from this rich white man to go over there and to kill an elephant, to cut off its head and put it on his living room. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the total destruction of our planet. And I think they want us to become more spiritual, become more loving, more consciously aware that we don't just live in a physical reality, that we're much more complex than that. And so I think that's the agenda of what's taking place.
Well, I wanted to, before I say goodbye and wrap up the show, and also ask Frank if there's anything else he has, let you know that Chris Bledsoe actually contacted me back and said to say hello to you.
Well, tell Chris and his wife that I love them both.
I did, actually.
And he better get his ass down to Miami and give me a call next time he comes down here.
I will tell him that. And also just want to let everybody know that the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, or also known as FREE, Rey Hernandez serves on the research committee for that. And just wanted to ask you, are there any other things that you can share with people about FREE? You shared the website. You did say it's down temporarily for maintenance. It will go back up. So everybody needs to understand that if they go to the website, it may just show that it's down temporarily, but it will be active again in a few days. And then also, he did share his email address, so you can contact him directly. He'll go ahead and say that again before we get off the air. And Frank, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we get off the air?
Just wanted to tell Ray how much I enjoyed having you back on with us again. Really love the speculation. I mean, that part of it is fun, kicking around some of these ideas. It's wild. We don't understand it. And, you're not coming on saying, well, oh, yeah, definitely it's this way or that way. It's like, yeah, you're speculating, but I think speculation is a good thing. I think we've got to do a lot of it. It's just got to be reasonable and, just be clear that what you're doing is speculating. And so long as you do that, it's A-okay in my book.
Well, the speculation that I've done is based off what thousands of experiencers have told us.
Yep.
Okay? For example, I know that a matrix reality exists because I went there. I know my friend Alberto has gone there, and I know thousands of other people that took our survey have gone there. I know ND experiencers have gone to a matrix reality, except it was through an NDE. Okay? So there's certain things that are speculation, but they're based upon fact of what people are saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. We also know regarding a multiverse that all PhD physicists, all of them, adhere to a multiverse theory. Okay. Rudy Shields told me, he says, Ray, if you graduated with a PhD in theoretical physics today, you are an adherent to a multiverse theory. Okay. So that means that all of these high-level PhD theoretical physicists, they all know that we don't live in just one reality, okay? But yet we're the totally clueless ones, okay? And we've got these materialists saying, oh, that's full of shit because that's not real. But yet you've got this 3 physicists from MIT talking about a simulation reality, and all theoretical physicists all around the world, understanding that we live in a multiverse. So, who's talking bullshit and who is not, okay? I'll go with the theoretical physicists instead of with mainstream nuts and bolts ufologists any day of the week.
Right. Chris did get your message, and he will get back to you on it.
Okay, fantastic. Also, I want people to know is that for a year and a half, we've been working on a science-based documentary. Okay, and we've been interviewing a whole boatload of scientists and experiencers, again, to present this new theory. It's going to involve the same topic as our book, except we're going to try to make it entertaining and present the science physics of this reality that we're dealing with through scientists and through experiencers, because they're both saying the same thing, except they're saying it a little bit differently.
Understood. I do know that you gave 2 lectures, I believe, in Los Angeles on January 15th and 16th of this year. And I think that was at UPARS LA. You did a lecture on what is the relationship between consciousness or cosmology and contact with non-human intelligence via the contact modalities. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and this weekend I will be at Contact in the Desert in I know it's not Palm Springs, but it's one of those desert communities. Just look up Contact in the Desert. I will also be speaking at Alien UFO Con in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the second week of August. The first week of August, I'll be speaking in Hong Kong to a major UFO conference. Last year they had 1,300 people that will be there, and again, it's going to be an awkward situation because the other main speaker is Laura Eisenhower. So you already know, my way of seeing things, and then also I will be speaking again in Los Angeles at the goodness, I always get the name wrong. Neil Gore's organization, which is forgive me, Neil, but it's Ascension, the Ascension Conference in Los Angeles, and that Portal to Ascension, to Ascension.
Yep.
And that'll be the first week of October, Portal to Ascension, and that's in Irvine, California. So the 4 major conferences that I'll be speaking at this year. And plus the free organization, we've had 2 conferences over the last 2 years here in Miami. And this year we're going to have a conference in the first either the first week or the second week of November, and our featured speaker is going to be the Reverend Michael Carter.
Okay.
And we'll have other experiencers. My wife is telling me to go to sleep.
Tell her we said hello, and vai con Dios. Tell her I said that.
All right, I'll tell her that.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm very glad that you were able to let us know about that Portal to Ascension Conference 2019. I'll go ahead, and I did drop a couple links regarding the conferences that you'll be at. And we're just so grateful to have had you on the show tonight. Thank you for your having taken the time to spend with us tonight. It's been a real treat and a pleasure and a privilege.
Yeah, thanks again, Ray. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and I apologize for anyone that was offended by my terminology.
We're thrilled, actually. We actually don't get this kind of treat very often, so it was nice to be able to hear what somebody really had to say. And you are not afraid to share what's on your mind, so we're grateful to you for that.
Thank you very much.
It was both entertaining and educational, so thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ray.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Yep. And there we have it, another show in the books, and we'll be back next week. So good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.